Long time no see. Hello everybody, today I am here to finally talk about my top 10 favorite books from 2019. 2019 was an interesting reading year for me. It wasn't my favorite by far, but it wasn't my least favorite. I'd say 2018 was my favorite year of reading. I read some of my favorite books of all time that year. I really expanded my genre with reading more adult books. I found books I just fell in love with and authors, and it was just a phenomenal reading year. 2019 was so-so. I read a total of 94 books, and when I look back at those 94 books, there is a lot that I really love, but the majority of them were just okay books. This year I really focused on quantity over quality, which is something I never want to do because I'd rather read less really good books than a whole bunch of just kind of books. But I'll talk about that in another video when I really go into my statistics and things like that from 2019, so be on the lookout for that very soon. But we're here to talk about my top 10 favorite books from this year. This list was hard to comprise because, like I said, there wasn't a ton of books this year that I was just like, I'm obsessed with this, I love it, I just want everything from it. So this list is a little bit of just insanity. We'll just go with it. Coming in at number 10 is Well Met by Jen DeLuca. This is an adult rom-com type of book, contemporary romance, whatever genre you want to say. I do have a lot of romance on this list because I love romance, and those are some of my favorite reads. I just want to be fully transparent with you on that. But it's basically about a character named Emily who has lost her job, her boyfriend, and she decides to move home with her sister because her sister was in a car accident, so she's recovering, so she's having to take care of her niece that's in high school. And then somehow she gets wrapped up in this Renaissance fair that's happening at her niece's high school. And there she meets one of her niece's teachers, and he is like the head of the Renaissance fair, and he's really mean and broody, and she doesn't understand why they have this hate-hate relationship. But of course time goes on and it develops into something more. This is a really fun one. It made me really fall in love with Renaissance fairs, even though I've never been to one in my life. I want to go to one now, but at the end of the day, it was just a cute romance book that I adored. I love just sweet romances, and this was that, and I loved it a ton. Coming in at number 9 is Supernova by Marissa Meyer. I have a full-length review on this. If you want to check it out, I'll leave it up here and down below as well. This is the third and final book in the Renegades trilogy. The Renegades trilogy is a heroes versus villains thing. We have the Renegades, who are the heroes of the city of Gatlin. We also have the Anarchists, who are the villains. In this story, we follow Nova, who is an anarchist, and she's trying to seek revenge on her murdered family, and so she decides to join the Renegades undercover as an anarchist to take them down from within. It's just a fun series. I'd say if you really love Marvel or like DC kind of movies where it's about superheroes, this is a great series to read. It's fun. They are long. I will say these books, like, they're not just fun ones you can fly through. They're lengthy. The second book was my least favorite, I will say. The third book I really loved. I loved how it ended. You can definitely tell that she's gonna revisit this world, at least I hope so. But overall, when I think about this series, I think it was just a fun, like, pow, kick thing. It was just a fun YA, sci-fi, fantasy, whatever you want to call it, that has heroes as the main forefront that I really loved. And it talks more in the series as you go on to it about the line that's blurred between good and evil. Not everything's black and white. There's some gray areas in between, and you have to really navigate that. So I love this series. Really fun. Highly recommend it. Coming in at number 8 is Things You Save in the Fire by Catherine Senner. Yet again, another adult romance contemporary book. I told you I just love these books so much. This is an underrated book. I don't hear anybody talk about it, much less I don't think I'll probably see it on anybody's top 10, honestly. It's on mine because it really just came in under the radar and I fell in love with it so much. It's a short, sweet book that I loved. We follow a character named Cassie, who is a female firefighter, and she's doing really well in her career, and then she learns that her mother is not doing so well health-wise, and her mother asked her to move back home to help her out. Her and her mom have had a very strained relationship, so Cassie feels very hesitant, but ultimately she decides to move to Boston to help her mom, and then she has to start kind of her career over again because she's a female firefighter, and the fire station that she joins really doesn't take kindly to that. And she also meets another rookie fireman that she develops feelings for, and it's just overall a very sweet book with romance that is just beautiful, and also talks a lot about family, about her and her mom have to patch things up because they've had such a strained relationship, and you really delve into that more. But the romance was just one of the sweetest romances I've read this year that I just love so much. So you probably haven't heard about this book, but I really recommend it, especially if you love romance and just those sweet romances and family stuff as well. This is a great one to read in my opinion. Coming in at number 7, this will probably be on everybody's favorite list, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey Miss Quinton. This book came out strong this year. Everybody loves it, and it's understandable why. It's a beautiful, well-written book that has a great love story, and also it's a political, which I don't love the political aspect because I myself am not a political person. I never will be. I stray away from that kind of stuff, to be honest. But this book was just freaking amazing. In this book, we follow Alex, who is the son of a female president. So it's kind of like an alternate, future type of book. And Alex has problems with the actual prince of Britain, and his name's Henry, and basically they get into a tumultuous thing and they have to pretend to be friends, and then it develops into something more, and it's just an amazing book. The friendships are strong in this book, the romance is strong, the political aspect is strong. I thought this was an amazing book. It's a debut novel. It definitely does not read like a debut novel in my opinion at all. I thought the writing was very strong, the romance was very strong. I'm not going to talk too much about this book because it's on everybody's top 10 list with good reason, so I'm sure you've heard about it and you've already decided if you want to read it or not, but I really did love it. Coming in at number 6 is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I finally read Carry On this year, and I'm so glad I did. It was the last Rainbow Rowell book I hadn't read, and I just put it off for I don't know what reason, but I'm so glad I decided to pick it up this year, and I loved it. If you don't know Carry On is a fantasy contemporary book. I would say it's not really fantasy. I'd say it's like contemporary with some fantasy stuff in it, if that makes any sense. So if you've heard of her other book, Fangirl, in Fangirl we have a character named Kath, and Kath loves Simon Snow, which Simon Snow is quintessentially Harry Potter. So she loves Simon Snow, she reads Simon Snow fanfiction, she writes her own fanfiction. So Carry On is pretty much Simon Snow's story. So it's like a story within a story, if that makes any sense at all. So this book follows Simon Snow, and he is a wizard, of course, and he goes to the school and roommates with Baz, who he thinks is a vampire that's also a wizard. They have a hate-hate relationship. You can guess what goes on from there, but it's just a fun book. I heard so many amazing things about Carry On, and everyone was like, it's funny, it's great, it's everything, and I was like, I don't know if it will be, but I really loved it, honestly. I thought it was funny. I thought it was great. I did read Wayward Son, its sequel, and sadly, I did not love that one as much as Carry On. I loved Carry On. It will definitely be my favorite in the series for sure, I feel like. But overall, if you just want a fun, kind of satire-y, whimsical take on Harry Potter, I would definitely recommend Carry On. It's just a good time, honestly. Moving into my top 5. These are truly my favorite of the year. Like, when I think about my year of reading in 2019, I think about these 5 books predominantly. Coming in at number 5 is A Heart in the Body in the World. I always say the title wrong, by Deb Coletti. This is another underrated book where I don't hear much people talk about, but it definitely needs to be read. It is a YA contemporary that's a deeper one. It's got a lot of depth, a lot of things like that. In this book, we follow a character named Annabelle, and Annabelle decides to run from Seattle to Washington, D.C. to make a difference, to be an activist, to do something. And you as a reader do not know quite what happens. You figure out what happens and why she's deciding to do this run throughout the book, and I don't want to spoil it for you, anything like that, but it's a very serious topic that needs to be talked about, and Annabelle decides she wants to make a difference. So she decides, like I said, to run from Seattle to Washington, D.C. And she doesn't run completely. Like, she takes breaks and things like that. Her grandfather follows her with his RV. They stop. They have like a route. Her brother's in charge of the route, and they do stops and things like that. And it's just a beautifully written book. I've never read a Deb Coletti book, and she has a lot of books under her belt that I definitely need to check out. But this one just packed such an emotional punch, and it was just so strongly written. I think everybody should read this book because I got so much out of it, and I think every person that reads it will get something out of it. And again, the writing is just beautiful. So yeah, I love this book. It definitely packed an emotional punch, and it's gonna stay with me forever. Coming in at number 4 is The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is the second book in her Heir of the Folk series. This year, we got 2 Heir of the Folk books. So at the very beginning of this year, in January, we got The Wicked King. And then in November, we got the very last book in the series called The Queen of Nothing. That is not on this list. The second book is by far my favorite book in the series. If you don't know what the Heir of the Folk series, it's a YA fantasy series, and we follow a character named Jude. Jude is a human living in the fairy world. Her one of her sisters is fairy, and her stepdad kind of whisked her off to fairyland, and she's trying to make it in fairy world. Fairy world is very tough. Fairies are very abusive, not the best people, obviously, and she wants to make it. And then she's trying to do that, get with the political things, make it, and prove herself. And she's also having a hate-hate relationship with Carden, who is like the Prince of Fairy. And if you can't tell already, I have this thing with hate to love relationships. It's my favorite trope of all time. It forever will be. But it's a really good series. I will say this is my favorite book of the series, hence why it is on my top 10 list. I will talk about The Queen of Nothing more soon, but yeah, I love this series. It's just a fun fantasy that's not like really, really in-depth fantasy. Like, it's easy to follow is what I mean. Hopefully I'm explaining that right, but I enjoyed it. If you love fairy books and fantasy books, definitely check this one out. Coming in at number 3 is Evie Drake Starts Over by Linda Holmes. This is a quiet book, and I always talk about quiet books on my channel. And what I mean by quiet books is that there's not a lot of plot that goes on in these books. It's really a character development book, a character dissection. You just really focus in on a character's life and hone in on it. And Evie Drake is exactly that. So Evie Drake is a woman that is a widow, and her husband had passed away, and everyone thinks she's really grieving and having a hard time. And the bottom line is she's really not, because she was in a very tumultuous, abusive relationship that nobody really knew about. So when her husband passed away, she was actually about to leave him. So it's about Evie Drake, quintessentially, as the book says, starting over with her life. And she meets a guy named Dean who decides to live in her house because he's a baseball player. He was a famous pitcher, but he can't pitch anymore for some reason, called the Yips or something like that. And basically he decides to move to this really small town. Let's say this book takes place in Maine. He moves where Evie lives in Maine, and he moves into her house as like a tenant, and of course they forge a friendship and something more. But overall, I don't think I'll see this a lot on top 10s because it's definitely not a book for everyone. There's not a lot that happens. It's kind of about a sleepy town, and we follow characters. She's trying to navigate her life after her husband's death and try to figure out who she is as a person, because she doesn't know, because she's been in this relationship so long and she's hidden herself for so long. So I'd say if you're a really big fan of just character development stories and books that doesn't have a ton of plot, I would definitely check out Evie Drake. I loved it. It reminded me a lot of Eleanor Oliphant's Completely Fine, which if you love that book, I think you will enjoy this one. If you didn't like that book, you probably won't like this one. But I really, really loved it. It was a debut novel, and I thought it was phenomenal. I'll definitely read more from her. But like I said, if you just love those sleepy town quiet books, this one is great for you. All right, my top 2, I mean, they're both kind of just my favorite books of the year. They're both just different genres, so there's that. They could probably both be number 1 in my opinion, honestly. We have The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary. Again, another adult romance book. We all know that's one of my favorite genres. The Flatshare came up out of the blue this year, and Chelsea from Chelsea Darling Reads read it, and then everyone else started reading it, and I read it, and I fell in love with it. So thank you, Chelsea, for introducing me to this amazing book. A character named Tiffy and Leon. And basically, Leon has his apartment, and he's like a night nurse, so he's never home at night. So he decides to kind of sublet his 1-bedroom apartment, and so he has Tiffy come in. Tiffy has the apartment from like 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. and then she goes to work. And then Leon has the apartment from like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. when he goes to work. So basically they're like living together, but not living together. They sleep in the same bed because it's the 1-bedroom apartment, but they don't ever sleep together because they like alternate shifts. I hope I am explaining this right. So imagine you had a roommate. Roommate's there during the day, but you're not there during the day because you're at work, but you're there during the night, but the roommate's not there because he's at work. Does that make sense? Either way, never really met. They leave each other post-it notes of like things like the dishwasher's broken or dinner's in the fridge if you want some of that. And then as time progresses, the notes get more detailed and they learn more about each other. And you can guess where it's going from there. I loved this book so, so much. It was just a sweet romance and I adored every second of it. I love the post-it aspect of it. It's probably my favorite part of the whole book. I just adored it so much. You get both perspectives of Leon and Tiffy. Leon's definitely hard to get a hold of, like to grasp his character, but as time goes on you understand him more. But overall, definitely by far my favorite romance of the entire year. I loved it so very much. Other favorite book of the year will probably be on everybody's favorite list, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is her latest book, and if you don't know, in 2018, when I said it was my favorite year of reading, it truly was, because that was the year I discovered Kristen Hanna and Taylor Jenkins Reid, two of my favorite authors of all time. I read like 4 Taylor Jenkins Reid books in 2018, and it was a phenomenal reading year for me, which is why it'll be my favorite year. So this year she released a new one, and of course, I fell in love with it. This is a historical fiction book, I guess you could say. The book is told in all interview format, so it's not a traditional written book at all. It's told in all interviews, and we follow a band pretty much called the Daisy Jones and the Six. We have the Six, who is a band, and then they have Daisy Jones, who is a singer, come in, and it's kind of like a Fleetwood Mac, a lot of other kind of 60s bands influence into this. And basically we follow the story of Daisy Jones and the Six, of how they got so popular and how they rose to fame, then all of a sudden they just split up and nobody knows why. And this is like the VH1 Behind the Music type of thing. If you are old school like me, you will remember VH1 Behind the Music. Phenomenal series. I wish they would bring that back, but it's a glimpse into what happened to this band, and I loved it. I've heard the audiobook is amazing, so I would recommend listening to the audiobook if you're interested in this book. It's got a full cast and everything like that, but I love this book. Taylor Jenkins Reid, there's not a book of hers that I don't love. I'm just going to be fully transparent with you. I love all of her books. So this one, I know it's going to be everybody's favorite probably, but I loved it so much. I love the 60s aspect. I love the music. I listened to Fleetwood Mac for a week after I finished this. I never listened to Fleetwood Mac, but I was determined, but I loved it so much. So I'd say if you're a fan of Taylor Jenkins Reid, definitely check this out, but it is very different from her previous books, but I loved it. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 favorite books of the entire year. I am going to do some more videos in the future. Be on the lookout for my least favorite books of the year, for my reading survey, and all of the books I've read in 2019. Those videos are coming soon. I'm very behind on videos, obviously, but either way, I would love to hear what your favorite books of the year are. Do we have some of the same? Do we have something different? Everyone has such different taste. I love watching everybody's top 10 videos because I always get something different from each one, because everyone has such different taste. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.